What is going on? Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of the Big Dudes in the Trenches. As the tweet said, if you saw that, Bug and Tug are still sidelined for this one. So we have the unthinkable, the return of the Jug. Welcome back, good sir.
Nice to be back. Nice to be asked back, to be honest.
Yeah, last episode was too much fun. I couldn't hold you back any longer. We needed more Jug on the show. So that's what really happened. And we have actually kind of a massive show today. There's a lot of
Mm.
things that happened this past weekend. So we're going to be here a good minute talking some football across not only the NFL, not only college football and the FBS level, but also Division Two, Division Three. There's news, there's things happening, and then we'll get all the way down to the CFL after a while. There's a little bit of something for everybody here in this one.
Absolutely. Can't wait to dive into it all with you.
Well, unfortunately, before we do that, I do want to start off with something a little bit serious. Um, if you haven't heard the news today, this morning, as we're recording this, there are 3 players for the University of Virginia who have passed away due to fatal gunshot wounds from a former teammate of theirs. This is a really bad situation, and truly, truly, my heart was breaking when I saw this news. There's nothing else that can really be said. I don't know if you want to add anything, but I know for sure I'd like us to start off with a moment of silence. Lavelle Davis Jr., Deshaun Perry, Devin Chandler, you'll certainly be missed, and it is very unfortunate who's coming out of Virginia today.
Yeah, very sad. Very sad.
So, with a little bit of perspective in us, I guess it's time to go ahead and start talking some
Mm.
football. From one cry
Yeah.
to another, I guess we should start off with Deshaun Watson.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
so terrible. I
My
feel so
God.
bad for
Oh my God. This situation from a football perspective. My God. Yeah.
that.
Another thing of like, what do you say about this? I
So
podcasted plenty about this in the off season.
Deshaun Watson is allowed to start practicing today, as of the time we're live. He will be eligible to play for the first time in 2 weeks from now, week 13, against the Houston Texans. That definitely wasn't planned. Definitely didn't see that one coming. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much like WWE Roger Goodell like watched sort of growing up and coming up as a person, but this feels like something ripped out of the WWE. You know, I feel like we're gonna have the Deshaun Watson music, whatever that is, playing as he enters the field. Like this is contrived. That like you could have picked any number of games to suspend him, and you picked this one.
I'm trying
Something's
to
fishy.
imagine Deshaun Watson music, and all I can come up with is a sexual assault type beat, and it's brutal. I don't know. I can't think
Yeah.
of one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll leave my jokes here at the risk of alienating the audience.
Well, there were some injuries this week. Kyler Murray didn't play. Cooper Kupp got injured during the game against those Cardinals. Uh, some other things. Most of it seems relatively minor. I know. Uh, wow, completely blanking on the defensive player's name. There's a guy, Chase Young. Yep. I was like, Ohio State defensive end. I'm trying to think of one of the Bosa brothers. It's not them. Yeah, Chase Young is still on IR. He will not be playing tonight, but he should be back relatively soon. I didn't see too much other news, though, out of the NFL, other than just a fantastic slate of games. Actually, this weekend's probably the best games we've seen all season so far.
Yeah, like it was an incredible lineup. I feel like the season actually has been underrated in a way. Like there's been a lot of weeks where I've been, but before it's happened, going, I don't know about this slate of games, and then we've had some really close matches. We've had some upsets, and I feel like we got all of that again as my dog goes off its head here. Don't know if you can hear that in the background. That's just the Yukon Huskies from later in the show. Yeah, so I'm very excited to get into this slate because another exciting one.
Let's go ahead and jump to it then. I think the best way to talk about some of these games is to look at the games that we picked. This is our pick'em records earlier this season so far. Have you been picking NFL games like I know you have for college football?
Yeah, I actually have. I'm in a pick'em competition with some friends and family. Um, I really don't know if you can hear my hellhound in the background, the world's
A little
smallest
bit. It's all
security
right.
dog going off. Okay, cool. All right. Well, as long as it's not too bad, we'll push on. So yeah, I have been picking. I was just trying to find my record for the season. It's on an app. If you go ahead
All
with
right.
what you've got
We'll,
to
we'll
say. I'll
keep
see if
going.
I
We'll
can
keep
find
going.
mine.
We'll come back around to the records at the end of this anyway. This is where we were at the beginning of the week before any of the weekend's games. Of course, we don't pick Thursday night, which actually was an interesting matchup. The Falcons and the Panthers. The Panthers do win this one 25-15, and looked like PJ Walker was going to be named the starter the rest of the season. He had an high ankle sprain. Yeah, so we'll see some more Baker Mayfield, unfortunately, because the Panthers are much better with PJ Walker, gotta say.
Well, and unfortunately, too, from a Panthers perspective, in terms of the draft capital, they have to give up to the Browns back the other way because I have a feeling that's a reason why Mayfield had a pretty short leash this season was that, depending on the amount of time he plays, the amount of games he plays in, I think that draft pick back the other way increases. So I
Mm.
think they would have been happy to have him sit on the bench as long as possible. Of course, I'm never picking against the spread in a Thursday night football game again because I took the Falcons in this and they were never really in it. Um, my big takeaway from my big takeaway from the Panthers was: would you ever spend high draft capital again on a running back? Because you trade away Christian McCaffrey and Deontay Foreman comes in and just looks like an absolute bulldozer. Almost every week he's played. There's been a few like this season where you're like, man, and I've got my own feelings about Pittsburgh using a number one pick to draft Najee Harris. Not that I dislike Najee Harris, but when you've got other needs on your team, like first round running back feels like an absolute luxury to me.
Yeah, and I know at this point most people feel that way about running backs. I would say there are a select few who are capable of doing enough on the field where it becomes worth it. The
Mm,
best example of that in the NFL right now would be Christian McCaffrey. When he's on the field, he is one
true.
of the best players in the entire league at any position.
Mm,
That's worth a high draft pick. That's worth a first rounder. Saquon Barkley, yeah, maybe a little bit overdrafted. He doesn't catch as well as some other running backs. Doesn't have any kind of a route tree accessible to him, and doesn't even
mm,
have a power element to his game. Maybe you could argue he was overdrafted. I would still probably take that kind of a player in the first round, though. He's extremely
mm.
talented, and when he's been healthy again, it's absolutely been worth it. So it depends on the player, it depends on the team, and it depends on the scenario. But I would say to make a blanket statement like that is probably never going to be the best option.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think you're right. Like the situation matters a lot. Like for the Bills this year, or teams that feel that they're there, and it's like, well, let's just sprinkle in a first round running back to really help get us over the line. Like I understand
Right.
that fully. Yeah, you're totally right. You can't just make a blanket statement. Could we make a blanket statement about Marcus Mariota from
I'm
this
certainly
game?
tempted to. I'm certainly tempted to. Arthur Smith has come out and said that there's no way we're changing quarterbacks. I just have to say, is Desmond Ritter potentially the worst quarterback in NFL history? If that's if that's actually the case.
Well, my God, that commando roll throw by Marcus Mariota at the end, like
The
I don't
stuff
know.
of
You talk
legend.
about, yeah, that's meme worthy. That's meme worthy. Talk about quarterback instincts. Like, what are we doing there? What
There
what was
there
going through the
is
mind?
there's a great account on Twitter. I don't remember the handle, but it's like art but sports, or sports but make it art.
Yeah.
And there's they just
Okay.
take these like iconic pictures of NFL games or NBA games or whatever and try to compare it to paintings from like the 1600s, 1700s. They did one for that play, and it's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I
Truly
can
a
imagine.
Renaissance painting. Marcus Mariota flipping over, trying to get the ball out of his hands.
Far out.
So
You
we
know, it
did
works.
make
It works.
picks. We did make
Mm.
picks for the Chargers 49ers, which Sunday night started off a lot better than it ended. I have to say, I think the biggest reason for that would be all the injuries piling up along the middle of that Chargers defensive line. The 49ers were able to just run the ball all over the place that second half.
Yeah, they really did stomp on them, yeah, in that second half. And another great example from the weekend of all different sort of levels of football, how important running the ball is. If you can run the ball, it just gives you so many more options. And if you can't stop it, you're pretty much cooked. And the Chargers found that out in the second half. They really hung in there with San Fran. Jimmy G still makes me so nervous for the 49ers because if he's going to miss someone, he's missing high. And when he's making those throws over the middle of the field, and you're like, oh my God, this is just going to sail right over the receiver into the hands of a safety.
Right.
But he got away with them on the week on Sunday night. I mean, Brandon Ayuk having that sort of guy catching the ball is a plus. Yeah, the Chargers are frustrating to me. Um, Brandon Staley, I think, they quoted Brandon Staley in the broadcast as having been frustrated with sort of the level of disrespect. We're 5-3 and no one's talking about us. And
Right.
it's games
And
like
this is
this
why.
that I feel like, yeah, like, and there's a Twitter account I follow at Draft Vogel on Twitter, and he made the point of like, this is another game in which the Chargers are really in it or up at halftime, and then they no show in the second half, and you start to wonder about like the adaptability of the coaching in the
Right.
second half. And I'm certainly not Brandon Staley's biggest fan, and it's games like this where it's a 6-point game. And you fall short by that on the road. These are wins that can help you secure a playoff spot. And so a really important one for San Francisco in that division as they try and catch the Seahawks.
Absolutely. Commanders at Eagles is happening right now as we speak. The Philadelphia Eagles just scored again, so they're taking a
Oh
13 to
boy.
7 lead, 7-point lead pending for them. I will have to say, though, we did all pick the 49ers. I didn't mention that before, so good on us. It was 16-10 at halftime, but then, 22-16, 49ers pulled out. Good for us.
Hey, tick, 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 tick.
We also picked 3 other games to watch that were not prime time. Unless you want to count
Mm.
Germany as prime time, I guess it kind of was by itself up there at like 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Uh, yeah, Buccaneers, Seahawks, definitely a success for the NFL. The German experiment absolutely worked out exactly probably better than they could have hoped for. I heard there were
Mm.
3 million plus ticket requests for this game. Insane number. They were also drinking
Mm.
pints at a time, which is incredible. I wish we could have German beer prices in stadiums here. That's personal beef of mine with stadiums. And before I turn it
Yeah,
over for your analysis here, I just want to say this is kind of impressive. The Buccaneers did win, which gives Tom Brady his 4th different country to have won an NFL game in. Of course, the United States, Mexico, England, and now Germany.
that's that's nuts. That's insane. I was actually listening to a podcast earlier in the week, and Ike Taylor of the Steelers was on, and I don't know, they were having a chat about greatest quarterbacks or whatever it was, and he said Brady's not even the greatest of all time. It's just like he's just a walking statue. Like he's a living myth, and I think that's true. He is. He's impossible to compare to anyone else because the records he has, the numbers he's put up, the achievements unlocked, it's insane. And I've really appreciated watching Brady play the last few seasons, even his last couple at New England. As much pain as he caused my Pittsburgh Steelers across the 2000s and 2010s, like at a certain point, you have to just develop this begrudging um, sort of acceptance and respect for him and the Patriots because no one's done it better than the Patriots did, and no one's done it better on an individual level than Brady. And it felt to me like they got right on that final drive against the Rams last weekend,
True,
going down
true.
that 2-minute drill to win it. It felt like they unlocked something and they came out and, this game was a 5-point margin, but this game probably should have actually been about 24-3. There were two really silly picks that the Bucks threw. One, rolling Fournette out to the right like a run play and then having him throw back across his body. They actually ran that play earlier in the game as a run, and Brady was left all alone, wide open. But they run it
Mm.
the second time, and the DB stands in. Tom Brady slips over, and it's a pick. Brady threw another pick, which I think he didn't see. I can't remember if it was a linebacker over the middle, was sort of just hidden behind the crashing of the line. Brady threw it to what he thought was an open man, wasn't open. Those two mistakes and costly mistakes ultimately that let the Seattle Seahawks back in. The Bucks' run defense came to play for the first time this season. They really started to scramble Geno Smith's mind. He looked as sort of poor as I've seen him this season. He looked a little bit cooked in the head as he was running around scrambling. Had a bit of happy feet. I just sort of thought there's signs there that if you can do the right things, if you can stop the run game and put Geno in a bit of a blender, this Seahawks team can be had. And but for those mistakes, um, the Bucks would have had this one pretty comfortably. In actual fact, I'm glad it was close because I watched this game in full and really enjoyed the comeback. But the Bucks had the foot on the throat until they made a couple of silly mistakes that let Seattle back in.
Tom Brady's now 2-0 post divorce. Gotta keep an eye on that stat line.
You've got to, it's a bit like you got to spend money to make money. Sometimes you got to take one ring off to try and put another ring on.
That's incredible. Oh man. Uh, so we were 2-2 as a unit on that one, Bug, and of course you took the Seahawks. I understood
Foolish.
the selection, but yeah, it's Tom Brady. My game of
Yeah.
the week was
Yeah.
Vikings at Bills. Most of us were thinking the Bills were going to win this one because we didn't really believe in the Vikings. I gotta say, probably have to reevaluate my opinions after this one. I just want to run down a brief summary of how this game ended
Yeah.
and I'll ask you a couple of questions here. So
Okay.
the Bills had an incredible goal line stand. There was like a minute left in this game. Incredible goal line stand. And then on the next play, they fumble the snap and give the Vikings a defensive touchdown. So now they have to come back with like 30, 40 seconds left on the clock. They drive down the field, kick a field goal, send it to overtime. What? 2 scores in less than a minute, both unbelievable. We're in overtime 30-30. The Vikings put up an incredible drive, long drive, about 6.5 minutes, get a field goal out of it, which means Josh Allen gets the ball and he throws a dumb interception. Just a bad placement of the ball. Gives the Vikings the win 33-30 in overtime. I was not at all expecting this performance out of the Vikings. So my 2 questions. Number 1, are the Vikings legit? Is this the leader in the NFC for you right now? And number 2, is that Stephon Diggs trade possibly like the most even trade in NFL history? Because you essentially got Diggs for Justin Jefferson straight up. They both had insane games. I don't know if you have a bad option between them. Just Stephon Diggs let the Bills compete right now, and Justin Jefferson developed into basically another Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, insanity. I'll start with the question. I think that is up there with amongst the most even trades of all time, and particularly like same position as well.
Right.
Wide receiver ultimately for wide receiver. And if you were listing off the top 5 wide receivers in the game right now, you'd be pretty close to saying that those 2 would both be in the top 5. You add in Tyreek Hill, and a couple of other guys.
Right.
It's pretty massive value for both sides.
Kind of be hard not to put them both in the top 5, actually.
Yeah, and I think this Vikings team is for real as a contender in the NFC. This was a big prove it game,
right,
for me. And my co-host on the JBSE is a Vikings fan. He got up at 5 a.m. to watch this game live. He said he was very loud at 5 a.m. And I guess what I would say is I've still got the Eagles ranked ahead of them because the Eagles are yet to lose, and the Eagles have a head-to-head victory over the Vikings.
right.
They beat the Vikings pretty comfortably. I think it's
Vikings only
24-7
lost,
or something. Absolutely. And I think this is a game. This is going to give the Vikings so much belief because you don't
Right.
need a perfect Kirk Cousins game to win. They go in, they make plays on, every part of the ball sort of thing, every side of the ball. I feel like this is a crucial bit of reading, and that's the second half drive chart for the Bills, which went punt, field goal, interception, punt, fumble, field goal, interception.
Wow.
Whereas the Vikings in the second half went interception, punt, touchdown, downs, end of half, field goal. So the Bills didn't score a touchdown after halftime, which I think was pretty massive. And this is a huge win for Minnesota. They've got the division sewn up, absolutely airtight, sewn up. So now you can start looking at, can we make a run at the number 1 seed, get a bye, get our first playoff game in Minnesota. I think it's massive win for the Vikings.
I do just want to state the obvious. This was the best game of the season so far. And if this is a Super Bowl rematch, I'm totally down for that.
Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? And like as a Bills fan, you got to be sort of cut up about this because this is again another game that felt like that match in Arrowhead last season in the playoffs where it's like, how did we lose this game? It's another epic. The Bills are sort of making a habit of playing in the best games of the season and being on the wrong end of them, which is something you don't really want to have.
It's something they're used to, though. In the 90s, they certainly had a history of that as well. So,
and just a point too on Josh Allen, now 6 interceptions in his last 3 games. He's gone 2 interceptions, 2 interceptions, 2 interceptions. So he had become so good at protecting the football. And just at the moment, turning it over, he had a fumble that he lost as well. And so those things are crucial in these games against fellow contenders.
Yeah, these last two games definitely dropped him out of the MVP race, I would say. Probably down
Yep.
to Patrick Mahomes, Tua, Jalen. Tua's probably out of it, though. The injuries will probably keep him away from that. But Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, I don't know who else you have up there at this point. I guess we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
it's
see the
pretty,
rest of the
and
way.
like, it's a quarterback award. So, as
Right,
much as you can
right.
look at other players around, and what they achieve. Have we got time for a quick Patrick Mahomes stat?
Sure. Always down for Patrick
I was
Mahomes
just,
stats.
it's just interesting because there's been a lot of talk about like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, he's dropped off a little bit this year without Tyreek Hill. And I've actually not heard his name mentioned. I'm glad you mentioned it in the MVP conversation, because a lot of circles I've heard, it's sort of like, I don't know, he's the man left out in a lot of ways. But
Mm,
so his first 9 games of 2018, completed 66.2% of his passes, 2,901 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The first 9 games of this season without Tyreek Hill, he's completed 66.9% of his passes,
nice.
2,936 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So he is very, very close right now to playing at the same sort of statistical level that he did in 2018 when he won the MVP. I just think he's cursed himself by setting ridiculously high standards. So unless he
Yeah.
throws 5 picks and one of them's a no look, we don't sort of jump up and clap. He's phenomenal. A phenomenal
Yeah,
player.
that's actually been an issue with like the Heisman race as well, right? There's no shot Bryce Young wins it this year. There wasn't at the
Mm,
beginning of the season, even going into the year, right? Because if he puts up identical numbers, people are going to say, well, you already did that. It's not as impressive,
yeah.
right? It's
Mm.
okay. Well, they were good enough to be best in the country last year. So it ought to be
Yeah.
worth considering. Like Lamar Jackson won it, came back to college, actually technically had better statistics in a couple of categories, wasn't even on the ballot, right? It's
Mm.
it's kind of the curse
It's
of
hard to do
being
twice.
too good early. Gotta,
Yeah.
yeah. I would say Patrick Mahomes is probably my favorite for the MVP though right now, and
I
yeah,
agree.
Josh Allen definitely dropped out. Bug did pick the Vikings. Good for him. I don't know why, but
Well
I also
played.
don't know why I picked the Colts, and that worked out for me too. So I was the only one to pick the Colts against the Raiders
Man.
because why would you? Why would anyone? I was rooting for some chaos, and it definitely happened. On Saturday, after we talked about this game, a couple of days after, Matt Ryan was named the starter again, thanks to the new head coach, Jeff Saturday, just saying, yeah, Sam Ellinger, you're kind of trash. Going to play the guy who has at least some experience. And it seemed to work out pretty well. Jonathan Taylor also went off, probably his best game of the season, uh, probably double his previous best game of the season. Like there
Yeah.
was a huge workload put on him, and he delivered. This was the first Raiders I saw where it felt like Derek Carr was forcing the ball to Devontae Adams at every opportunity. It really seemed like with Waller being out now, with no real relationship with his other wideouts, there is no option for Derek Carr other than number 17, and that's going to hurt the Raiders a lot going forward the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Derek Carr frustrated, emotional in his press conference after the game. Um, Devontae Adams, 14 targets. The next closest on the team was Josh Jacobs with 8. So the next closest wide receiver was Mac Hollins with 6. So Adams, 8 more targets. The next closest wide receiver, a good 80 yards more receiving than the next closest receiver. And obviously you want him to be your number one weapon, but
Right.
this team just feels dysfunctional. They
Yeah.
feel dysfunctional. I'm interested to see what the long-term bounce effect of the Jeff Saturday hire is. Like Jim Irsay's come out on Twitter and he's already taken a big victory lap on everyone who sort of criticized. Let's just see what happens across the next little while, because
Right.
the dead cat bounce is sometimes real with these coaching changes. Like, it would also not surprise me if this team now went, 0-8 or 1-7 the rest of the way. It would not shock me in the slightest. Jonathan Taylor getting back to form, that's a welcome return. I picked him to score a touchdown. He hadn't scored one since September the 12th, believe it or not, Jonathan Taylor. So it had been a while between drinks for JT, and he certainly made the most of it. 147 rushing yards on 22 carries and a touchdown. Matt Ryan was neat and efficient, which is ultimately, I guess, what you want from 57-year-old Matt Ryan. Also, though, 4 carries, speaking of 57-year-old Matt Ryan, 4 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown, and the one where he took it around the edge and took off down the sideline. Lamar Jackson,
It was
eat your heart
impressive,
out.
gotta say.
Do you think there's any chance that the Raiders coach, Josh McDaniels, gets sacked at the end of this year? Mark Davis has come out and said, oh, no, he's doing a fantastic job. But I feel like this means nothing. Words mean nothing in the NFL. If they really crater, I mean, they're not making playoffs from here. Do you think there's any chance he's a one and done in Vegas?
There's always a chance. I'm not going to rule it out. I would say at this point, the way everything's been structured, it would take something egregious. Say something that Mark Davis and him fundamentally disagree on in the offseason. That would definitely cause that. I don't see any way that if Mark Davis is coming out and saying this, that's not necessarily coming from him. That's coming from the media questioning, which is going to happen when you're losing, right? I don't think Mark Davis was even considering the question. The way he answered it, I don't think it was ever a consideration until that question was asked. So, I doubt it, but anything's possible. We've seen stronger statements be turned on their head before as well. So,
such as no, Todd Gurley's healthy. I swear, he's really healthy.
Right.
He's running the. Right. He's fine. His knee's good.
Yeah. Yep. His knees are great for an 85-year-old. Yeah.
That's right. I do wonder about Derek Carr. He said, "Oh, I'm not going to leave. I'll retire before I play anywhere else." And I just wonder. If it's one of those things ultimately where it's like, well, we got you an improved wide receiver. Like, he hasn't played badly at all. I don't think he's played badly. I just wonder if he's unlucky with just how the optics of it, I guess. Anyway,
I actually did see a report that this is from an ESPN reporter. I'm not sure the validity of the report. I don't have any other way of knowing. It said that there's growing sentiment in the building that Derek Carr is on his way out if they don't improve. And they will turn their attention towards CJ Stroud specifically in the draft, which interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, how would he know this? And number two, why would they already have a quarterback in mind? They haven't gone through any of the combine processes or the draft interview processes. It seems suspicious to me, but that report's out there. Really interesting.
Very interesting.
So
very interesting.
after this week of picks, Tug and Bug went 2-2 this week. I went 3-1, giving me the weekly Stonks Award, going all the way up.
Well played.
And did you find your record on the season yet for the NFL? Because
on this, so we've been doing an every game sort of pick. So at the moment, I've got 92 correct across the season, which leads our comp by 4. But I went 6 of 13 this week, so a down week for me. But it had been going all right before this week. I think I got 12 of 14 last week or something. So it's been all right. It's been all right.
So you get last week's Stonks Award, but definitely mine this week.
That's right.
But let's go ahead and talk about some of the players that we had pegged to watch out for this week. Chase Claypool was Bug's start at receiver in fantasy. That is definitely the wrong decision if you did that. I'm sorry if you listen to this advice. Only one catch on 2 targets and only 8 yards out of it. Yeah, it's not going to do anything for you. His sit was Curtis Samuel, who is in action right now. So I don't have any real news for you there, how that's going, but we'll come back and check it out later. On the running back side of things, Tug gave us another Washington Commander to sit this week, Brian Robinson Jr., but really he kind of wanted all running backs for the Washington Commanders just because I don't think anybody expected any individual player to have a good offensive performance against this Eagles defense, which I understand, but also it's 14-10, so somebody's moving the ball somewhere. The start for Tug was Nick Chubb, who obviously had a good week because he always has good weeks. This one wasn't as good as some. He did have a fumble in there, but still 12.1 standard and 15.1 PPR. You're not going to be too mad about that if you had him in your lineup.
Absolutely. I'm really happy because I managed to stash Kadarius Toney on my roster as soon as he got traded to the Chiefs, and he's starting to heat up. So I had a horrible start. I think I started 0-6 for the season. I'm now, I think, 3-6, hoping that I can climb in the back door of the playoffs. That's the intention.
That is gross. I hate everything about that.
Yeah, that's right. Me too.
Well, that's enough.
It's a fall from grace.
That's enough NFL talk. I can't stand any more of it. I'm the college football guy, which means it's time for some college football. And we have some fun things to start off with. Welcome to the Mountain West. New commissioner, Gloria Nevarez. She is the second ever woman to lead a major conference in college sports, joining current Conference USA commissioner, Judy McLeod. Gloria was most recently the commissioner of the West Coast Conference. If you don't know that, that's because it doesn't have football. West Coast Conference is known for having Gonzaga. That's about it. But at the same time, she does have plenty of experience with football conferences. For, I believe, 8 years, was the senior associate commissioner for the Pac-12. Should be some good experience in there for the Mountain West. Actually, she's also on the Division I Transformation Committee, so a little bit of a powerful voice for the Mountain West as well. And hopefully good looking out for that conference in realignment talks and rule changes, all sorts of things that could affect the Group of Five. This looks like an excellent hire, and really do wish Gloria Nevarez all the best here.
Yeah, absolutely. Massive. And, it's probably a bit of a trope thing to say, but I like when you see more women being hired into positions of power in sport, any position in sport, really, whether it's coaching, whether it's management, whether it's sort of behind the scenes or at the corporate sort of level of it, because I just think it brings new perspective. I don't get the opposition to it. Like, it still happens with coaching when you see, female coach hired into the NFL or something, and people are like, oh, what can she possibly offer? It's like, well, a whole different perspective to anything that,
Right.
that the dudes on the staff can offer. It's just a different, it can be a different way of looking at things, different life experiences. And as you said, Gloria Nevarez comes with all sorts of powerful resume background. So yeah, I don't know a lot about it, but it sounds like a great hire to me.
And with Tug being an Air Force fan, we do track the Mountain West pretty closely. So Gloria Nevarez, we will be tracking your career with great interest.
Absolutely.
Next up, a couple more really fun things. I think we need to start with UConn being bowl eligible Now, here's the issue for the Huskies. I guess I should set the tone first because this is incredible. The fact that Jim Mora has gotten the Huskies to being bowl eligible. It's his first season with the team. Completely turned it around. They won 2 games last year. One of them was against UMass. So it's not like they're historically great program. They've only made one bowl game in the last 12 years. And they got kind of booted out of the American Athletic Conference in a way. They joined the Big East, who does not sponsor football anymore. So they're independent in the FBS and haven't made a bowl game as an independent. So the issue for UConn right now is that even though they've won 6 games, they are independent, which means they don't have any bowl tie-ins. They have to wait to get invited as some at-large bid. So there are a couple of options here. ESPN and CBS are projecting that UConn will be invited to the Lending Tree Bowl. Sports Illustrated is projecting they'll be invited to the Arms Bowl. Whichever happens, this is incredible, and I'm very excited for the future of UConn football. And I don't think anyone's ever said that. Maybe since 2006, 2007.
Yeah, absolutely. And like they started 1-5 this season. They've gone 1-4 this season rather, and gone 5-1 their last 6 games. I actually
Including
watched
this
their
week
first game of
against top 25 Liberty. Incredible.
Craziness. And that Liberty team, who did they beat last week? I'm trying to think. Who did Liberty get
Arkansas.
over? Yeah.
Arkansas.
So
Yeah.
Transitive Properties, UConn would be favored over Arkansas as things stand right now on a neutral field.
UConn finishing 4th in the SEC West.
That's the YouTube clip for for this episode. Could UConn finish 4th in the SEC West? And just pictures of our faces looking like shock. They should have won their opening game too at Utah State. I watched that game and like sort of deceiving. Utah State got on top for 1 quarter. 24 points to none in the second quarter, but it was a 31-20 game. UConn got up 14-0 in the first. I think they lost their starting quarterback, and then there were a number of officiating decisions that went against them. It was a really frustrating game, and you could see even there the potential of this team. And we should also forget this is 2020 New York Times national champions UConn. So
Right.
I mean that's something. Hang a banner.
Oh man, I actually had forgotten about that. That is
yeah.
Wow.
It
wasn't even
never
really
forget.
by choice though. They were independent, so everybody canceled their games on them. It wasn't UConn deciding to cancel their games. Nobody was playing out of conference games the COVID year. Oh man,
history will remember the 2020 national champion UConn Huskies.
The New York Times does not follow football as closely as we do. Let's just put it that way. Another fun thing here. I am an Ohio State fan, but I think everybody can get a little bit of something out of this one. Did you hear the story of Cameron Babb this weekend?
I did not. Fill me in.
So Cameron Babb is a senior on Ohio State. He was a top 100 recruit at receiver. And to be top 100 out of high school is really, that's something. He was expected to do great things for the program. He tore his ACL before the start of the first season that he was going to play, out for the year. Going into the second year, rehab had gone very well. Freak non-contact accident injury, tore another ACL. Going into his second season, couldn't play that year. COVID year happens. He gets a little bit of time on special teams. He appears in 7 games, but can't do much. He's still kind of recovering from 2 torn ACLs. Going into last year, guess what happens?
No way.
He tears his ACL again. in total, throughout his college career, he has had 4 torn ACLs, actually. And finally got healthy enough to get into a game and scored his first touchdown in college football this game, this weekend against Indiana. Even through all those injuries, he had been voted as a captain on the team twice now. This is his second year as a captain. And he's also the spiritual leader on the team, leading the entire team in prayer on the field before games. He is very much so kind of the embodiment of what Ohio State's looking for in just an all around great player and a great young man. One of only 3 students at Ohio State to give a speech when Ohio State introduced their new president to the university. He's that respected all around campus. Also, ever since the NCAA made the number 0 possible to wear, Ohio State's kind of taken that as that go number. We need to treat it special. We'll give it to one special story a year. You see Cameron Babb there wearing the Block O jersey this season. Not only voted by the coaches, also voted by his teammates. He has the love of everybody in that locker room. And it's just the insane comeback story for him this year. I can't believe he finally got a touchdown. It's just, oh man, the game almost stopped completely. He was just running up and down the sidelines, hugging everybody, literally everybody. Found his mom in the stands. It was, wow, it was pretty awesome.
It's amazing, those sort of moments. You can sort of start to take it for granted, I suppose, when you see different athletes, achieve things, and then you see someone, achieve something as relatively routine as catching a touchdown. That happens all the time, week to week. Ohio State catch a lot of touchdowns week to week.
Right.
But you see the context of it for someone like that, who's had to fight and to get on the field. And I remember listening to, there's a really good 4 or 5 part podcast series about Andrew Luck and his time at the Colts. And that delves a lot into the dark days of rehab, of trying to rehabilitate from injury and the loneliness of it and the dark places that you go. So you can only imagine what that feels like, finally getting out there, finally doing what you feel like you're meant to do, catch touchdowns. And it's massive. It's massive. So I feel really good for the young bloke. It's awesome.
I'm really hoping he can stay forward. If he does have 2 years of eligibility left because of a redshirt season, and then the COVID year added a year of eligibility for everybody. So, even though he's a senior, we may see him again. I'm really hoping so. His story has been just incredible. Love the guy. Next up, in our last really fun story before we get into some business here, we have a new NCAA record holder for career tackles. This is kind of insane. Carlton Martial, linebacker for Troy, now has actually 548 career tackles. Broke the previous record set in the 1970s by a linebacker out of Northwestern. Even better part of the story, though, Carlton Martial was a walk-on to Troy who didn't have any D1 offers. 5'9", 210, undersized for the linebacker position, just balls out every single game. Came into this past weekend with 20 tackles to go to break the record, and he had 22. Unreal.
That's amazing.
So
I was just trying to look like, so it's like almost an average of 10 tackles a game if you average it out across his career.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Very impressive. Huh.
Yeah, so he is on the watch list, actually now a semifinalist for the Burlsworth Award, which is awarded to the best former walk-on each season. It went to Baker Mayfield twice. I'm going to boycott the award if they don't give it to Carlton Martial this season. Not a voter, but come on. This is an amazing story. Undersized linebacker, no offers, new NCAA record holder.
At least you can rest safe in the knowledge that Baker Mayfield won't get it for a third time.
That is good. That's very good to hear. Oh, man. That's gross. I don't want to think about that anymore. Imagine
having a walk on at the Panthers.
He gets cut from the Panthers, has to walk on to another NFL team. That's the logic.
Yep.
So we have a few weeks to go before Selection Sunday, but we're still getting AP polls, and they're still worth looking at. Compared to the BDT trench ratings, the top 4 are pretty good. The top 5, actually, are pretty dang good at this point. Georgia, the obvious number 1 for everybody. No argument from me. Ohio State did jump the team up north in the BDT trench ratings this week, mostly because Notre Dame keeps winning, actually, making Ohio State's resume better. And even though UConn's bowl eligible, team up north did win that game 59-0. So, a little bit of a different resume there. TCU, they are 10-0. They did beat Texas. There does feel like a tier gap between the top 3 and TCU, though, even among the AP voters.
Yeah. Look, as a Hypnotoad acolyte, as a TCU fan, I acknowledge we are not really probably close to those top 3 teams, and I'll admit, probably not even actually on a neutral field against anyone else, the 4th best team in the country. I'll admit it. That's fine. But it's been a fun journey, and if we get to 13-0, they'll have to put us in.
Right.
So
give them no choice.
I hope that's right. And if we go and get smoked by Georgia or whoever, so be it. But a lot of teams have been to the playoffs just to get smoked by Georgia or Alabama, etc. So it's just nice to be there. It's nice to be in the conversation.
LSU all the way up at number 6, though, really makes no sense to me. I understand the playoff committee kind of put them up in the top 10 to prop up Alabama, and then LSU won. So now you're kind of in this weird situation where a 2-loss LSU might have a realistic shot at the playoffs now. Kind of gross. Kind of hate that. According to the BDT trench ratings here, Penn State is a top 10 team. I want to get your take because it's a very interesting case. Their only losses are to number 2 and number 3. They've blown out almost everybody else.
Yeah, and I suppose like that's the tricky thing when you talk about tiers and that sort of thing. Like their only losses are to top 4 teams, but then again, how close did they get to those top 4 teams? Were they ever realistically in those games? Like, and this is the interesting question as you start to think about like 12-team playoffs and all that sort of thing. I don't personally think 12. I don't think there are any given year 12 teams that can win the playoff if given the chance. I just don't think that's right. There's probably 3. There's probably 3. 4 in a really good year. 4 in a really good year that at the time of the playoff could win it. Because some teams get hot at the end of a year and maybe they don't have the record to sneak in. And they would get in a 12-team playoff, but there's a clear delineation for me with Georgia, Ohio State. Look, even just there, but I haven't watched a lot of Michigan, so we can draw that line under those 3. I thought the Tennessee Georgia game was revealing. Like Georgia's defense sort of curb stomped them. They put up 13 points.
It was a 2-touchdown game, and it felt like it was much wider than that, actually.
Yeah. definitely. So I think it's fine to have Penn State as a top 10 team, because I think the drop off after those top three is pretty significant. You know, you can sort of throw a blanket over the others. I think USC. I wouldn't be surprised if USC UCLA is this weekend, isn't it? I
Yes, it
think.
is.
I wouldn't be surprised if UCLA beat USC, and that will pretty much end the Pac-12's hopes of getting a team in the playoff. What happens if LSU wins the SEC championship? If they somehow win out, beat Georgia, is it Georgia and like LSU who are the SEC champs? Who
It would
misses
have to
out then?
be.
Like if TCU's 13
It
and
would have to
0
be the way it's
and
currently structured. I don't think LSU should be in that scenario, but I think they would be. And
mm,
you'd probably end up with let's make it as simple, right? The winner of the game goes undefeated and wins the Big Ten. Because I don't want to say the other one's name, let's call it Ohio State. They would become the one seed in that scenario for sure. You would probably
yeah.
have, if TCU wins out, you'd probably go ahead and say TCU's your 2 seed, actually. Make LSU the 3 and Georgia the 4, or Georgia 3, LSU 4, even though LSU just beat Georgia. It makes it really difficult.
Hey, if you
And
can give
also,
us TCU versus the Tigers, I like our chances. Let's go, Horned Frogs.
from the perspective of considering this is a TV spectacle and that's all it's designed to be, do you really want your semifinal to be Ohio State Georgia when that feels much more like a championship game than TCU LSU in that scenario? I don't think
Yeah.
they would line it up that way. And I think that would be part of the consideration at that point. I would also have to wonder, is there a scenario where LSU wins the SEC and instead of LSU getting in, it's still Georgia and also Tennessee stays above them? That is
Mm.
possible, and they would become the first SEC champion to miss the playoffs. I kind of don't think that's going to happen the way the rankings have been set up here. It's possible, though. And especially if LSU loses another game in the regular season, which they have the luxury of doing so, they've clinched the SEC West. So it's there are so many scenarios on the table. We could sit here for days.
But for the fun of it, this year would actually be a fun year for the 12 team playoff,
Right?
because there feels like a lot
Absolutely.
of sort of frisky teams. And ultimately, I don't think making a 12 team playoff is about giving the opportunity for 12 teams to realistically try and win. It's the
Right.
idea of extending the relevance of 12 teams,
Right.
another week or two. Because right now
Some
it feels very exclusionary or something. Exclusionary.
Right. No, I saw a great analysis and explanation of the exact thing you're talking about, where before the playoff era, in the BCS era, the goal for every team, make a BCS bowl. If you make it to the national
Mm,
championship instead, that's incredible. You're one of the top 2 teams in the country. That's awesome. But Ohio State's goal, for example, every season, we need to make the Rose Bowl. Well, now that's not the
mm,
case. It's playoff or bust, and there are only 4 teams who make those. There are still 4 other major bowls that are on the table every season that nobody cares about anymore. That's not a goal of any team. They want to be in that top 4. So because the playoff is expanded already to 4 teams even, it has to expand again, or else it's just 4-team playoff or bust, which is not at all realistic. There are 131 teams in the FBS level right now, about to be 134 once Sam Houston, Kennesaw State move up. There's Jacksonville State's moving up as well. that's not realistic to say you have to be in the top 4 or else you failed. Now, there are
Yeah.
obvious exceptions to that. Texas A&M definitely failed this year. Love
Yeah.
jumping on them from the top ropes whenever available. But you can't say that USC has had a bad season if they go to the Rose Bowl. That's a wonderful year for them, an incredible turnaround. And yet there are going to be plenty of people who say it was a failure because Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams couldn't combine for a playoff appearance. That's not fair.
Yeah, and as TCU fans, I think we should be really thinking if we can win the Big 12 championship. The season to date has been an exceptional success, but if you can win the Big 12,
Right.
whatever happens with the playoff happens. But it's a shame that conference titles sort of have lost their relevancy, as something to strive for. It's like, oh well, yeah, we're conference relevant, but we're not playoff relevant, so we're not really relevant at all. It's like, well, any given year, there's 2 or 3 play teams that are truly national championship relevant because that's where all the talent is. Now, maybe that
Right.
changes over the way a little bit with the transfer portal. I think you've seen that a little bit this year where, you don't have a bunch of good quarterbacks sitting around on other rosters just festering on the bench. Like other teams have been able to go and get a half decent quarterback to come and play for them, which is really good. So yeah, I was a bit doom and gloom about college football, say 6, 7 months ago, but this season I think has been really fun and shown where the sport can go if we can make it more truly, um, if we can increase the relevancy of teams for longer, um, whether that's through, like you said, relevant bowl games or expanded playoff or whatever it is. But I think there's so much potential.
I have so many thoughts on the transfer portal and all that mess, but we are
Yeah,
we're too deep into a conversation about
off season.
number 15 in the FBS. We got other things to discuss, including some really awesome FCS action. Next weekend is going to be. Actually, I think I want to hit something else first. Let's go ahead and talk about the actual selection Sundays we've already had. I think that's going to be the better transition here.
Okay.
It's kind of insane. We're talking about all the potential scenarios of an FBS playoff with only 4 teams, and yet at other levels of the NCAA themselves, we've already figured out a pretty great playoff structure. For
Yeah,
example,
exactly.
let's go ahead and look at the Division II playoffs, which the selection Sunday was yesterday as we're recording this live. This is a lot of teams making the playoffs. Seems to me there's more than 4 teams with the potential to reach the national championship game. It's kind of
Well,
interesting. I will say there are 4 undefeated teams in this bracket. Not all of them got the 1 seed, though. Indiana, Pennsylvania also got a 1 seed, as confusing as that name is. Uh, but Benedict, Angelo State, Grand Valley State, and Wachita Baptist are all undefeated and in this playoffs. Now, I think listeners of the show will recognize Grand Valley State and Ferris State. We did pick that game when it happened in the regular season because it was number 1 versus number 2 at the time. Ferris State lost that game and fell all the way to a number 2 seed. We could get another number 1 versus number 2 in that rivalry, which is pretty awesome. I do technically, I think, have a rooting interest in the Division II playoffs this year because up there, number 4 seed in that first division, there's Ashland, which was about 35 minutes away from where I grew up in Ohio. So I'll pull a tug and root for the hometown squad. Let's go Eagles. But this is a real playoff right here.
yeah, it's a truly meaty bracket. This there's teams all over the place. I'm trying to wrap my head around how this even works. So there's essentially what four sort of playoffs that play down to a Final Four or something? Like, how
Well,
does
it's
this
supposed to
work?
be 4 sides of a bracket, but the NCAA
Yeah, right.
put
Okay.
it together poorly, and so this is the
No, I'm with you.
NCAA's graphics. But it should be that they're
Okay, I'm
towards the
with you now.
center. Yeah, it looks better on the Division Three side of things, which I guess we can go ahead and jump to, because Division
Oh,
Three has even more teams make the playoffs every year.
wow.
They still have 4 divisions, 4 quadrants of the bracket. There are actually 11 unbeaten teams in the Division Three playoffs this season. Kind of incredible.
Holy crap. Yeah.
And if you don't know about Division Three football, let me just say there are 2 big names to know. Number one and a number 1 seed this year would be Mount Union, Ohio. They won. I think Mountain Union won every national championship there was for like a good 6-year run there. And then they started going back and forth between Mount Union and Wisconsin Whitewater, which is the other big name to know. Lance Leopold had a lot of success there before heading to Kansas, of course. Um,
Yep.
yeah, Mount Union and Wisconsin Whitewater combined for 19 of the past 30 national championships. And every season from 2005 to 2017 went to one of those 2 schools. Kind of amazing.
Wow.
Dominance like we've not seen in any other division of football. Even
Yeah, it
Tom
makes me
Brady
think of
can't
like
match these
Rangers and
numbers.
Celtic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's intense. Wow. Yeah, and so what is this? Is this like a 32 team bracket or something? I'm trying to quickly count up.
1, 2,
How
3,
many
4, 5, 6,
teams?
7. Yeah, it's 32. 32 teams make the
Holy
Division 3
smokes.
playoffs. And we will have plenty of games between now and the championship, December 16. It's a Friday night championship for the Division 3 National Championship. I really don't have a rooting interest in this one. I guess if any school, I would be rooting for Carnegie Mellon because that's kind of fun. They're in Pittsburgh. I guess that's your team too now.
Absolutely. Let's go,
As
that
a
team.
Steelers fan, you have to be a Carnegie Mellon fan. That's what we're learning.
Absolutely. Carnegie Malone. Watermelon.
Uh,
Nice. I like it.
have there been any other? Are there any other Wisconsin teams that made the playoffs? Yeah, Wisconsin lacrosse made the playoffs as well. Wisconsin has several subsidiary campuses. They all have their own football programs. They're all Division Three, and they all play in the same conference. So usually you end up with Wisconsin Whitewater rising to the top, but there are like 9 other Wisconsins who usually all play pretty well
Wow.
too. They all have great offensive lines. Those farm boys know
Yeah.
how to push people around. But
The beef.
Division Three is just wild. And we'll jump to the
Absolutely.
next one. This isn't NCAA. This is NAIA, which you may have heard of if you're familiar with college basketball. NCAA tournament and the NAIA tournament are very separate. NAIA is also like the main governing body for college hockey. So they do plenty of good stuff down there in that level of college football as well. I will say the state of Iowa dominates NAIA football.
Yeah.
They are the top 3 seeds, all from the state of Iowa: Morningside, Grandview, and Northwestern. Now, this graphic is a lot cleaner and a lot easier to read, simply because NAIA reseeds after the first round, and we're only seeing the first round of matchups. I love that. I wish other playoff style tournaments would do that. The NCAA can't figure that out, apparently. I will say, I do have a rooting interest in this one as well. I know a couple of alumni from Lindsey Wilson in Kentucky. Glad to see them make it as an 8 seed here. Pretty exciting.
Oh,
Um,
very
Other
nice.
than that, I don't know anything about any of these teams. Gotta be real.
Hey, the Iowas, as you said, Iowa is dominating. What Morningside, Grandview, and Northwestern has that not only all in the playoffs, but the 1, 2, and 3 seeds.
It's
That's nuts.
pretty amazing. Look at Kansas over there too, with the 6 and the 10.
Yeah. And
The
playing off against
Midwest
each other.
dominates. There's 2 teams from the South, really. I mean, maybe 3. I don't consider Lindsey Wilson to be a Southern school necessarily, not the culture there. But Bethel, Tennessee, Kaiser from Florida, Reinhardt from Georgia. Everybody else is from the Midwest, straight up. Arizona as well, but who cares? They're the 16 seed. Oh man, NAIA playoffs. That championship will be December 17, same day as the Division II championship. So figure out where your loyalties lie, NCAA or other, and watch one of those. Should be fun. There is 1 week left of regular season FCS action before we get to the FCS playoff selection Sunday. Some great games this weekend, too. I will say that number 1 seed in the FCS playoffs is coming down to really 3 options. I would say 3 options, probably more realistically 2. But number 1 right now in both the coaches and the FCS, the Stats Perform FCS poll, is South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits did beat reigning champions North Dakota State in the regular season for that Dakota marker. They are the Missouri Valley Conference champions. Missouri Valley Football Conference has many a great playoff team in recent FCS history. That alone will get the Jackrabbits a lot of respect here. They are undefeated in FCS play. Only loss on the season coming to Iowa. FBS losses don't count on Selection Sunday, so they won't be penalized for that. They're number 1 probably simply because they beat North Dakota State. At the same time, South Dakota State and North Dakota State have to be the top 2 talented squads in all of the FCS. I don't know that there's really too much of a debate there between those 2. You have all of the stars, recruiting stars, that come to the FCS level. So I would say the Jackrabbits have a really good shot there. The other option would be Sacramento State, who I didn't expect to be this good, but they have come on in a big way. They are undefeated, including their FBS game against Colorado State. They are most likely going to be the Big Sky champion, depending on what happens this weekend. They also have 3 wins over teams currently ranked. That's really impressive. That's something that South Dakota State can't say. So South Dakota State has a win over number 4, North Dakota State, reigning champions. Sacramento State has wins over Weber State, over Montana, over just everybody in their path in a really good Big Sky this year. The one knock against them, they haven't played that other potential 1 seed, Montana State, also in the Big Sky. Okay, you can't design the schedule yourself. Can't really knock them for that. It's going to be a big conversation between these 2 teams. And I really don't know which one would win on a neutral field at this point. They're both playing extremely well. My personal vote would probably be for Sacramento State, but I definitely understand the argument for the Jackrabbits here.
Yeah, and I suppose you got to rate no matter what league you're talking about, but the fact you got 3 wins over teams currently ranked.
Right.
As well as being undefeated, you defeated your FBS opponent, as defeating Colorado State. I was just going to note too that the South Dakota State lost to Iowa, but only lost 7-3. Like I'm imagining, I don't watch a lot of FCS football, but I'm imagining that Iowa would have had the bodies to try and push South Dakota State around to an extent.
I don't know.
That's or if South Dakota State got the beef.
If anybody does, it would be the Dakotas. I will say as bad as Iowa's offense has been this season, they would put up points on most FCS schools. So still being held to a touchdown it's still impressive.
Yeah, sure.
The other
Like
potential
I said,
option, I
really,
guess, for a number 1 seed, I don't think
mm,
it'll happen, but it's on the table. Montana State is currently number 3 in the polls and undefeated in FCS play. They did lose to Oregon State. Again, FBS losses don't count on Selection Sunday. That was
mm,
kind of an ugly one, though. If you watched it, 62-28. Oregon State is much improved from what they were a couple of years ago. Give
yeah,
it to the Beavers.
just a bit.
Montana State, if they win this weekend, could either win or share the Big Sky Conference title since they don't play Sacramento State this season. They also have 1 win over teams ranked currently, but have a chance for another one this weekend, and game day is going to be there. The media coverage is on Montana State's side because there's a huge rivalry going on. The Brawl of the Wild is this weekend, more affectionately known by Montana fans, fans in the state of Montana, I should say, as the Grizz Cat game, as the Montana Grizzlies face off against the Montana State Wildcats. This is one of the longest running rivalries in all of college football. I believe it's the 4th longest running rivalry west of the Mississippi. And
Wow.
yeah, it's been in favor of Montana overall, but Montana State has certainly had their share of success in there as well. 5 combined national titles between these two schools, 39 combined conference titles, and a combined 66 consensus FCS All-American players across their school history. This is a massive game. College game day is going to Bozeman, Montana this weekend. Very fun. The game is sold out already. For a game coming this Saturday to be sold out a week early is it's pretty good in the FCS level, gotta say.
The Brawl of the Wild. That's how you name a rivalry game. None of
I
this like,
know.
oh, the old tin can or whatever your rivalry. The Brawl of the Wild. I mean, that is what we're talking about when we talk about rivalry games. Brawl
So
of
they
the
do
Wild.
compete for a trophy now, the Great Divide Trophy. It's pretty massive. Looks like a mountain. Got a couple of weird sculptures on the side of the mountain with a big football on top of it. This is actually a really cool concept, though. I like the idea behind it. This trophy didn't exist until 2001 and will stay permanently with the team who has the most wins in the series in the 21st century. They're only going to have this trophy for 1 century. That's it. It's kind of a cool concept. They have a lot more faith in the future of Western society than I do. But, if this game's still going on that long, good on whoever
I'm
has the
glad you said
series lead. I
it.
will say as well, you're probably going to see some great defense here more than anything. These two schools have combined for 1 Walter Payton Award winner, which is essentially the FCS Heisman, and 5 Buck Buchanan Award winners for the Defensive Player of the Year across their history. So great defense being played out in the state of Montana, and definitely a big game for both schools as they try to find their way into the FCS playoffs. The Grizzlies probably need to win here in order to get in at this point. They have 3 losses, all to great teams, but you still have 3 losses. If you make it 4, it's going to be hard to put you in there. So we'll see what happens in this one. Very excited to see College Game Day recognizing a great FCS rivalry like this, and looking forward to a good game.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will make a pick for this one, though, later in the week. It will be a ranked versus ranked matchup at the FCS level. But we had very different ranked versus ranked matchups this past weekend to pick from. This was our record going into the week. I do have a sizable lead here, but we'll see how that held up. a little spoiler for you potentially. I know you're picking every single FBS game this season. How's
Yep.
that going so far? How were you
Uh,
heading into this weekend? Let's say.
so this week I was chasing my 500th correct pick for the season.
Ooh,
I needed to do pretty well this week to get there. But we managed to achieve it. So I'm now 503 and 178 on the season. Um, I went
that is
47, 47 and 15 this weekend. So there were some upsets, obviously, that I didn't get, but then also cashed some easy ones as well with some mismatches. But yeah, 47 and 15 and 503 and 175 on the season.
that's insane. I know where most of your losses came from, and that's from this show. So let's go ahead and jump into those
Yeah,
games.
that's right.
We have 4 ranked matchups this past weekend at the FBS level. Our consensus pick here was that Alabama was going to beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss should have won this game for real. That was not a good performance
Yeah.
by the Crimson Tide. Actually, kind of a dirty performance, too. You see all those weird, nasty shots on Jackson Dart. That one face mask where they about snapped his neck. Kind of insane how this one went down. Alabama comes out on top, though, 30-24.
How,
Nasty.
how do you not get like flags on those plays? Because I was watching this game while I was doing some work, and I saw the replay of Jackson Dart getting pushed in the back of the head on the ground. And I was like,
Right.
oh, well, that must be a flag that extended the drive for Ole Miss. And then next minute,
Nope.
Alabama's offense is on the field. And I was like, what in hell? It was really horrific. And, Alabama get the win. Good for them. But I don't think you would walk away feeling any better about them. They got run on big time. Ole Miss piled up 191 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on them. Um, I just don't think this is a particularly good Alabama team within the context, obviously, of Alabama and
Right.
what they've been.
Right.
As you said, the penalties weren't called that should have been called. They only had 5 penalties called for 45 yards. Should have been at least 7 or 8 penalties. If you think about
For a couple of those yards.
the the assault going on on poor old Jackson Dart, who just sort of, seemed to be battered from pillar to post.
Probably the most amazing thing about this game, though, is that it actually sealed the division for LSU. They needed Ole Miss to lose this one. And LSU is going to win the SEC West after this result. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, not a bad year for Brian Kelly.
Next up, we did have number 22 UCF at number 17 Tulane, the first ranked matchup in New Orleans since the 1960s. And yeah, UCF was able to hold on. Honestly, watching this game, UCF controlled basically every aspect of it. A real credit to the Green Wave to keep it as close as they did. But every statistical category, everything you can think of, was in favor of UCF. And 2 lost fumbles by Tulane certainly would have changed the tide as well. To be only 1 touchdown actually shows me how good of a team Tulane is, how talented of a squad that is.
Yeah, and this was one where I remember when we were sort of analyzing this game in preview, one of my big points for taking Tulane was, Tulane's run defense has been pretty decent. If they can stop UCF running the ball, well, UCF had 54 carries for 336 yards and 4 touchdowns. So they didn't stop. Sort of a bit like Arrested Development narration. They didn't. They couldn't stop the run. And so the game really ended there. I mean, that's just such a lopsided stat. 336 rushing yards. You're
Right?
pretty much going to be able to control the game if you run for 300 plus on the ground.
Amazingly, That's kind of what Washington tried to do against Oregon, even though Washington has been awful at running the football this season. They were able to convert on some big plays just on the ground. Washington pulls off the upset 37-34, not purely through the arm of Penix, but through defense in the right spots, running game in the right spots, and actually they were pretty effective all around against the Ducks. I got to say, if Bo Nix had come back from that injury, game-winning drive at the end, he would have gotten my vote for the Heisman right then and there. Didn't happen. Washington pulls off the upset, probably in itself eliminating the Pac-12 from the playoff. We'll see what USC does, though. But I got to say, this was a killer blow to their playoff chances.
Yeah, you sort of think obviously a two-loss Pac-12 champion is not going to see themselves viewed as favorably as a two-loss SEC champion, and especially when you get thumped as badly as you did by Georgia in week 1, and then Washington throws for 400 yards on you. That throw from Penix, and they made a big deal about it on the broadcast because it was an absolute laser. It was like Zeus pulling a lightning bolt down from the sky and just flinging it. Like, the safety knew what was happening, and he tried to get across to cover, and he just could not. It was just an absolute missile. And credit to Washington. Like, they took it right up to Oregon. Oregon ran the ball really well, 318 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. But I think the Bo Nix injury was pretty critical. I was really mystified by the 4th and 1 decision.
The Bo Nix injury was at a critical
shotgun
time, too. I mean, that was probably bigger than the injury itself, just when it happened. Really broke up every bit of momentum Oregon could have hoped to have had.
Yeah, and I don't understand I understand the going for it on 4th down. I think there's about a minute left, but they're in their own half, Oregon. You're pretty much instantly setting Washington up for the game-winning field goal. And they lined up in shotgun. And I know it's college, and I know most of these quarterbacks don't take snaps under center, but you just wonder, like, if Bo Nix was in the game, would they have taken that under center? Bo Nix gets the QB sneak for the yard that they needed, and away you go. But I don't know, in that situation with my backup quarterback in, I might just punt that one down and see if we can get to overtime.
I would have. The defense was playing well enough at that point. I don't think Washington could have driven down for a field goal. I will say, though, we just saw in the Bills-Vikings how dangerous an under center QB sneak try can be. So
true.
Just do what you're comfortable with.
And that's with professionals.
Right.
Yeah.
But we all picked Oregon in that one. I think that undersells how good of a matchup we thought this could have been. Both of us had said this has a potential game, and it absolutely was one of the best games of the weekend in college football. Last ranked matchup of the FBS level, we did have number 4 TCU at number 18 Texas. We both picked Texas on the show. The guys who aren't on the show got the win, though. Hypno Toad held Bijan Robinson to a career low 29 rushing yards, and Quinn could not receivers. There were some throws that I saw Quinn Ewers make. He looks like an 18-year-old at quarterback, which he is, so give him some time. But man, that is not an offense firing on all cylinders just yet.
Yeah, and like curse of the Hypno Toad, I think TCU now 8-3 in 11 games against Texas since they joined the Big 12. The Hypno Toad has its spell cast on the Longhorns. I really loved this win for TCU because it's been all season like, oh, they're going to win the shootouts, but they're not going to be able to play much on defense. They're not going to be able to win gritty. Well, they won gritty, and really, but for a botched sort of handoff operation at sort of towards the end of the game that led to a fumble and a Texas score. Like, Texas did not score on offense. Did not score a touchdown on offense all game. It was just ultimately a defensive score that put them back in the frame. TCU ran the ball pretty well on Texas, 44 carries, 159 yards and a touchdown. Duggan didn't turn the ball over outside of that one fumble exchange. And I think that's a big difference. I think that's been really heartening to watch Max Duggan this season is, he can sling it, but he's not costed the team, too often either. He's been really smart with how he's run things, but just really happy. I mean, TCU went in as an underdog, undefeated TCU against, a 6-3 Texas team, went in as an underdog and got the job done. It wasn't pretty, but a win's a win, and 10-0 is 10-0 for the Horned Frogs.
And just like you, I'm happy that TCU won. I didn't want Texas to win. I just thought they probably could.
Yeah.
But we had 4 ranked matchups in the FCS as well. Another bad slate of picks for the two of us. We'll start off with
bloodbath on the picks.
I know. We'll start off with Richmond at Delaware. I went with the Blue Hens just to mix things up, honestly. I thought this was a very even matchup on paper. Ended up with all of Delaware's points coming in the fourth quarter. It was 21-13, and it didn't seem that close. Richmond played very well. I don't know what else to say there. Richmond very well may win the CAA this year, the first year without James Madison. It's coming down to Richmond and New Hampshire, which we'll talk about in a second. But Richmond, this was an impressive win for them, I got to say.
Yeah, and I think in the preview when I was just sort of scouting in my analysis, not being, super familiar with the FCS, I was like, well, both these teams have sort of moved the ball pretty well on offense. This might be a bit of a high scoring one as, what did it end up being in the end? 14-13 or something, and Richmond won it with a field goal at the end. Yeah. So disappointing for Delaware, but you leave it late and sometimes that's what happens.
Staying in the same conference though, Rhode Island at New Hampshire. The Wildcats pull this one out 31-28. New Hampshire has really impressed me this season. Just how they fought in their losses and the close wins they've had. It's been a real struggle. The CAA is a pretty dang good conference. I would say the third best in the FCS. And New Hampshire looking pretty good here. They won the second half by a lot. It was very impressive the way they came back and fought hard in this game. I want to throw this out here just as a credit to New Hampshire. Their quarterback, Max Brosmer, is a redshirt sophomore. He has 2,300 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 picks.
Wow.
That's interesting to me. If he can take care of the football and move it that efficiently, he might end up being able to get on some draft radar, maybe get on some transfer radar to the FBS level. There's a number of opportunities for him somewhere here. New Hampshire feels like they came out of nowhere. Max Brosmer would be a great reason why.
Yeah, that's a hell of a record, a hell of a stat line. And I believe this is another game we lost on a field goal at the end. Was it? New Hampshire, I think.
This one,
a field goal right at the end.
31-28 and right down to the wire.
Yeah. So close. So close.
That's how this week went for you, man.
Yeah.
Little role reversal here. Samford at Chattanooga. I even said on the show I thought Samford should win this game. I just picked Chattanooga because why not? Crazy things happen. And it felt right in my gut. But Samford very much so won this game. It was 35-24 at the end. Yeah, Samford's the better team, though. You could really see it. The way Samford showed up on defense in that fourth quarter, too. Really impressive. The Mocs, the back end of that defense is really concerning. I would say much worse than anticipated. A lot of people picked Chattanooga to win the Southern Conference this year. It's coming down to Samford and Furman. But I guess we'll roll right into that next game as well, because we all picked Mercer to beat Furman. Furman pulled that one out 23-13. I didn't expect that at all out of Furman. Mercer had been the much better team on paper so far this year. But that's why we play the games, right? I did not expect that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think this was the one I felt most confident with out of all the picks. And, I
Right.
wasn't particularly confident about any of them, but I thought, no, I've got this one. This one seems like, an easy case to close, but it was not. And I sort of followed along the score on this one live, and I thought Mercer are not going to get anywhere near this. Furman just seemed to be controlling the game.
I got to say, most impressive performance out of that one. Furman's sophomore receiver, another sophomore at the FCS level, impressing me. But Joshua Harris, 146 yards and a touchdown on only 5 catches. Wow. What a stat line for that young man. Very, very
Holy
impressive
moly.
game.
Yeah.
So Tug was the only one of us who did any good at the FCS level this week. 3-1. Rest of us 1-3. Pretty rough. I gotta say, that's 2 weeks in a row now where you can't trust my FCS picks. That feels bad. I don't like it.
Yeah.
But we have 3 more games to talk about, because we also picked games of the week. Starting off with Bugs game of the week, Kansas State at Baylor. Definitely thought this was going to be closer than it ended up being. 31-3 without Adrian Martinez. This was the backup quarterback leading Kansas State to a dominant win. Will Howard threw for 3 touchdowns, and Adrian Martinez is probably done for the season, unfortunately. But Kansas State appears to be rolling anyway.
Yeah, I've got a bad feeling that Kansas State are going to ruin our perfect season once they get to the Big 12 conference title game. I feel terrible for Adrian Martinez, obviously. At the same time, I do wonder, Will Howard, does he actually put Kansas State in a better position to win, especially now, he's going to get a couple of weeks at the controls. He came in, at short notice against the Frogs last time, against the Bounty Frogs, when we knocked the other quarterback out. So now he's going to have time to settle in the system. And I think Kansas State are a pretty good team. I think they're a pretty solid lineup. Baylor have kind of been frisky at times this season, but I think they've been sort of found out in big spots, by the other sort of contenders in the league. And I thought this was just another great example of that, of maybe Baylor's kind of frisky. Oh no, they're going to get sort of stomped by Kansas State 31-3. So yeah.
Yeah. That's all you can say about that one.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, this next game, I thought we were close on this one. I really thought we had it.
As surprising as I just said Furman over Mercer was, this one was even more out of left field. I could not have predicted this in a million years, as San Diego State actually kind of blew out San Jose State. I thought this was going to be a very close game with San Jose State coming out on top. No, San Diego State, the Aztecs took control, never let it go. Wow. They scored 31 unanswered after the first quarter and just kind of cruised from there. 43-27 ended up being your final. Even watching this game, I have no idea what exactly went wrong for San Jose State. It's just everything was working for the Aztecs.
Yeah, and like I said, San Jose State sort of were around early. They were up early, I thought, and I thought, oh, we're sort of in good position here. And I tuned out, went and mowed the lawns and stuff, because I had a window of opportunity before the storms hit again, and came back and I was like, what happened? What happened to our beautiful lock? Yeah, disappointing. I was really hoping San Jose State could pull out the upset, but yeah, 31 unanswered points. You're not going to do much from there.
Our last game, watch out for, just because of the story. This one, nobody expected to be a good game, and finally, we were right this week. St. Thomas did shut out Stetson 23-0. The St. Thomas Tommies are not eligible for the FCS playoffs, even though they have the record for it. They're 9-1. Kind of ridiculous rules, gotta say. They moved up 2 divisions in the NCAA, all the way up level, and they're not allowed to compete for a championship. Kind of some dumb rules there, but it's still a great story, and hopefully they're still winning once that probation period is up.
What a ridiculous rule. Like, I get it moving back the other way. If you're a team from an upper division going back, like, why are you being punished for being good? For, you've moved up 2 divisions, not just one, and you're still good. That's outrageous to me. Outrageous.
So St. Thomas very well may win the Pioneer Conference, even without being eligible for the postseason. Same with Merrimack over in the NEC. They might win their conference, even though they're moving up a division from Division 2 to the FCS this season. So, wow. Let's get a move on, though. We're spending some time on college. Stonks Award goes to Tug for the best record this weekend. The FCS really clutched it out for him. Gotta say, he is catching up. I hate it. Hate to see it. But you crossing 500 wins music is incredible. That's wow. Over 500 correct picks for you. We need to start betting on some of these games. That's what I gotta say.
It meant too much to me. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those moments sometimes, I remember playing table tennis or ping pong, whatever you call it, with my family when I was a kid, and we won a local championship, like a Division 3, and it meant too much to me. And I was kind of sad with myself in hindsight. Like, this meant too much. So did this. It was kind of a bit of a shameful moment, really. This shouldn't mean that much to me, but it did.
All right, so by the way, I definitely understand where you're coming from. But so let's look at the prospects to watch out for. Muhammad Ibrahim was my offensive prospect to watch out for this season. He still has yet to get under 100 yards in a game. Also put up 3 touchdowns in this game, setting a new career best for touchdowns in a season with a couple of games remaining on the schedule as well. Yeah, teams are going to have questions about the tread left on the tires, injury concerns, of course. But give him the ball. He is a workhorse back. And if he were in any other conference, he would have all of the all-conference honors and everything. Unfortunately, he's behind Blake Corum and Chase Brown in yardage, still a top 5 running back in all of the NCAA. So maybe 3rd team all-conference as one of the top 5 running backs in the country. Unreal. Ibrahim should be a name called in the draft. Really ought to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like, he's going to cross 20 touchdowns, you would imagine, pretty easily.
Right.
Crazy numbers. And as you said on the last episode, like, when he's not been injured, it's just been 1,000-yard seasons.
On the defensive side of the ball, Patrick O'Connell didn't play this week. Honestly, not the point of this segment. Not a players to watch this week, just players to watch out for in general. Having a great season and most likely getting saved for the big rivalry, the Brawl of the Wild coming up. And they definitely didn't need him this week, beating Eastern Washington 63-7 in his absence. So Montana's doing okay. And Patrick O'Connell's having a heck of a season as well. 8 sacks for him so far this season alone. Last year, 14 sacks for him. Unreal stats. Even with sitting out a couple of games, he's still in contention for the Buck Buchanan Award this year. That's how good he has been. So I really hope he gets an invite to like a Senior Bowl or East West Shrine type of bowl. I expect that he will, and I expect he'll perform really well because yeah, he's a good linebacker. That's, what else can you say?
Yeah, exactly. I will say, like their uniform. I'm a uniform snob, and I like the Grizzlies uniform. It's classy.
The good maroon
I
and
enjoy it.
silver, very classy. So moving on from college football, let's get into the XFL because we have some draft info. The draft will be held this week, like all this week, in Las Vegas. There's actually a couple of different elements here since we're basically restarting the whole league. So tomorrow, as in Tuesday, November 15, is the quarterback selection show. XFL teams have already made their picks on who their quarterbacks are going to be. This is actually more of a quarterback announcement show, but separate from the whole draft because there's no reason to include quarterbacks in the draft pool when you're trying to fill out entire 50-man rosters. Let's just go ahead and kind of regionalize this thing and get quarterbacks sorted out beforehand. So we'll find out who the quarterbacks are tomorrow. Then come Wednesday, we will have the XFL draft in snake order. This was a randomly drawn order for the draft. DC Defenders have the number 1 pick. Houston Roughnecks have the number 8 pick, and we'll also have the number 9 pick then. Snake format we're all familiar with at this point. There will be 4 position groups. I believe the rounds will alternate between the 4, and there will be 11 selections out of each of the 4 groups. So teams will take 11 offensive skill positions. That's wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, fullbacks. They will take 11 defensive backs. They will take 11 front 7 players and 11 offensive line players. Then after that, on Thursday, we'll get to punters, kickers, long snappers, and then the open rounds. So there are 66, I believe, training camp roster spots for each team. And then come the regular season, that'll be narrowed down to 50. So there can be quite a few open rounds if each team wants to make a selection. Not required to, but you're required to start with those 48. Quarterback, 11 of each of those groups, and then a punter, kicker, and long snapper.
This is like awesome from my opinion. Like, more football is great, but just it's kind of exciting when you start thinking about all these players sitting out there who aren't currently on a roster, who have just been continuing to grind and train and try and stay sharp in case an opportunity comes up. The idea that there's going to be 400 active roster spots available in this league. That's exciting for 400 guys out there. It's huge, and I think we're gonna have to have some patience with this league. I don't think everyone can. I don't think we should just be expecting. Like, I actually really enjoyed the last iteration of the XFL. I have a feeling this might have smaller beginnings. I don't know why. It's just a feeling I have. But I think it can be built to something really special, because I think some of these kind of partnerships they've built with the NFL, I think it's been really smart. It's been smart. You're not going to beat the NFL, so join them in a sense. Create advantageous partnerships. I think it really goes a long way to trying to ensure some longevity for the league, and via that, longevity of opportunity for players. Like we just said, all these players who are out there trying to keep their dream alive. I think it's a big deal for people. So yeah, hopefully people get on board and support it, and also are patient with it while they do so.
If you are interested in the XFL draft, we will have a lot more coverage on this on Thursday's show when Bug comes back. He's our resident XFL expert and knows a lot more about this than I do. So I'm the basics here. But with that being said, it's time to move on to international football, because the CFL playoffs are fully underway. The division winners have been crowned. Toronto with a big win over Montreal to start us off the day. 34-27 ends up your final there. The Argonauts are moving on to the Grey Cup.
Yeah, big win for Toronto, big crowd. I watched this game back this morning, actually. I had like a 12-hour NFL binge yesterday, so nothing else got in, including daylight. So today I thought I'm going to go back, and I had a watch of the Argonauts and the Alouettes, and this was such an even game,
Right.
except for the first quarter. Montreal spotted the Argonauts like a 17-3. It might even have been 24-3 lead before they were able to surge back. It was 14-3 to the Argos after the first quarter. Thereafter, it was 10 points apiece scored in the second. Montreal outscored them 11-10 in the third, outscored them 3-0 in the last quarter. But really, the game to me came down to the fact that when they needed to close out the game, the Argonauts were able to run. They were able to push the pile on that last drive. AJ Ouellette and Andrew Harris, particularly Ouellette, just a bruising kind of back. He had 6 carries for 38 yards in the rushing game, but then 2 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. They were able to get that lead early and then close it out late. Montreal played pretty well, except for that patch up front where they looked a bit nervous. It was a big crowd. It was a loud crowd in Toronto, and I think that played well for the home side.
Well, it looked like Montreal just really had no answer for that receiving threat out of the backfield. That's where probably the biggest difference lied in either of these teams' strategies here. Toronto is moving on here. The second matchup of the day, the BC Lions versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, the reigning, defending CFL champions, Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And they're moving on once again, 28-20 in this one. Nathan Rourke did throw those 2 interceptions for the Lions. That probably in itself is the difference in this one, because everything else, again, very good game.
Yeah, and again, we talked earlier in the show about the need to be able to run the football in the NFL at the college level, and I think that the Lions were a little bit exposed in this game. There had been some talk about BC. Could they play that playoff running game when they needed to, when their game is so built around the pass? And they couldn't. They had their leading rusher was Nathan Rourke, 2 carries for 20 yards. James Butler and Antonio Pipkin combined for 9 carries for 8 yards. They had just 28 yards rushing. Contrast that with the Blue Bombers, who were efficient in the passing game. Zach Collaros, 14 of 20 for 178, a touchdown and a pick. Then on the ground, Brady Oliveira, 20 carries, 130 yards. And Dakota Prukop, 7 carries, 37 yards, and a touchdown. So I think the best 2 teams have made the Grey Cup. I think Toronto can run the ball, and that's going to give them as good a chance as anyone to try and beat Winnipeg, who are going to be aiming for 3 in a row.
Yeah, the 109th Grey Cup this coming weekend. Really 2 of the best teams in the CFL just in general, not just this season. Combined for 29 Grey Cup championships between them. Before Winnipeg went on this streak, Toronto got their most recent one as well. So these are the 2 most recent champions, actually, are facing off in the Grey Cup. This is actually the first time they've played each other in the Grey Cup championship since 1950 in a game that's now known as the Mud Bowl. Really nasty, snowy game. The ground turned to complete mush inside the first quarter. Toronto did end up winning that one 13-0. And actually, crazily enough, Toronto has won every championship against Winnipeg when they play Winnipeg. 6-0 all time in Grey Cups when these 2 meet. Maybe history repeats itself. Maybe Winnipeg gets another ring. This is Yeah, this is kind of a huge game for both teams. Obviously, it's a championship game, but just the season overall has been really impressive for both squads, and the culmination of a lot of great storylines here.
Yeah, and as I said last show, like as a Ticats supporter who saw the Blue Bombers beat the Ticats in both the last two Grey Cups, including last year at home in Hamilton when the Ticats had it on home soil and the Blue Bombers won. Like, you can have nothing but massive respect for how they've been able to retool and reload for these seasons, because they lost key pieces this year and they've just gone again. Toronto have a really good chance to upset them, but obviously we're not picking the game yet. But it would not surprise me at all if the Blue Bombers made it 3 in a row. They're just so experienced. It's not every day you go into a championship game against a team that's been there the last 2 times. It's a lot of experience, a lot of familiarity with the stage that I think counts for a lot.
Do you want to go ahead and make a pick for this one?
Yeah, I will. I think Blue Bombers will get it done. I think they'll get it done.
Right.
I think it'll be really close, but I think they're a bit of a team of destiny. Their coach, and his name is slipping my mind, which is really annoying. It's just done a great job with this team. Mike Riley, maybe rings a bell.
No.
Just done a great job
Mike...
building this team, building this. O'Shea, isn't it? It's Mike O'Shea.
There you go. That's right.
There you go.
I was looking at that earlier today as well, and I couldn't remember.
Yeah, O'Shea. He's just built a brilliant culture, I think, of winning.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a ripper game.
So you pick Winnipeg. I have no idea who to pick, so I'm actually going to flip a coin. How about you call it in the air?
All right. Yeah, heads.
It is tails. I'm going with Toronto.
Okay. All right. There you go.
Let's go Argonauts.
Very good.
It's the most nonsense ways to pick a game that usually end up working. So that's what I'm banking on. But this has been a great show talking about football all up and down the entire continent of America at this point. I think that should about do it for the show. I'll let you shout out some links before letting you get out of here. Been quite the long one, but I know there'll be plenty of people listening who want to find you somewhere. Where can they do that?
You can follow me at the JBSE on Twitter, on Instagram. The Jake Bowtell Sports Experience is the podcast. So, yeah, lots of NFL content at the moment, but other sports as well across the year. And just my last little shout out is a big congratulations to the University of Saskatchewan Huskies, who won the Hardy Cup on the weekend, I think in the snow again. So they advance into the next round of playoffs in the U Sports competition. They fell just short last year, defeated in the championship game. So hopefully they can take revenge this year. So yeah, shout out to the Huskies.
Well, definitely shout out to the Huskies, and also shout out to you. Thank you so much for filling in for Bug and Tug over these past 2 episodes. It's been great talking to you. And also great listening to the Jake Bowtell Sports Experience. I think I showed you last year, your podcast was actually my number 1 on Spotify. So it's
awesome. Love it. Yeah. No, look, pleasure to be on, mate. Really appreciate, really appreciate you having me on. And anytime, always a good opportunity to talk football.
With that, I'll let you get out of here before I shout out some links of my own. Basically, BDT football everywhere you can think of. We're going to be located across Facebook, Twitter, our own website. Think about BDT football. You can find us anywhere you look. On YouTube and Twitch, of course, we are Big Dudes in the Trenches, all one word. And all those links will be down in the description, as well as Jake's links. The Jake Bowtell Sports Experience, a great podcast. Definitely recommend it. Next episode, at least Bug will be back. I believe Tug should be back as well. We might be at full strength next episode. I certainly hope so. As much as I love talking to Jake, founded with two of my great friends, Tug and Bug, and I can't wait to see them again and talk to them about some fantastic games this coming weekend. Definitely stay tuned for that. I don't have a dad joke for you. I don't have a Snapple fact. I'm not that guy. I'm also not the guy to say whatever Tug's catchphrase is that I definitely know, but I'm not going to repeat. So I'll just get out of here. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. And